It was just a normal Saturday when I was cleaning out the bathroom closet. I was trying to get rid of stuff we didn't need anymore to make some extra space. Old soap bottles, dried out nail polish, expired medicines. It was all getting tossed. When I reached the back of the shelf, my fingers brushed against something weird. I grabbed the small cardboard box and pulled it out to see what it was. At first I thought it might be a spare digital thermometer or something, but then I looked closer at the words printed on it: early detection pregnancy test. My heart skipped a beat. That was impossible. My husband and I didn't have any kids, and I certainly hadn't taken any tests recently. This must be left over from the previous homeowner or something, I figured, though that seemed strange since we'd lived here 3 years now. I opened the flaps of the box, planning to just throw the whole thing away. But inside, I was shocked to find a used pregnancy test stick. It was one of those digital ones that showed the words pregnant or not pregnant. I nearly dropped the stick when I read the little display. Pregnant 1, 2 weeks. What? No way. I stared at it in disbelief. The test looked old, but not years old. The result couldn't be real, of course. Still, a chill ran down my spine. Where did this come from? Why would someone hide a positive test in our closet? Uneasy, I packed up the test in its box and stuck it in the trash outside. I decided not to even mention it to my husband. It was just too bizarre. Somewhere in my head, I knew I should try to figure out who took the test and why. But I desperately wanted to forget the whole weird episode. Over the next few weeks, I was able to push it from my mind, until I started noticing some odd changes with my body. It began with food cravings. Pickles one day, and chocolate ice cream the next. Soon the smell of chicken cooking would turn my stomach. I was ravenously hungry but nauseous at random times. I also felt tired all the time, no matter how much I rested. I started going to bed earlier and earlier. My husband asked if I was getting sick. Just not sleeping well, I said, though I didn't really know why. Then one morning, as I was getting dressed, I paused and stared down at my stomach. Had it always pooched out like that? I turned sideways in the mirror. There was a definite roundness to my belly that hadn't been there before. A jolt of fear went through me as I remembered the cryptic pregnancy test. No, impossible. I was probably just gaining weight. But when I pressed on my stomach, the firm bulge didn't feel like fat. I didn't say anything to my husband. I was probably imagining things after seeing that stupid test. But over the following days, my waist continued to expand. None of my pants buttoned anymore. Dread flooded me as all the clues started to add up. That night I whispered to my half-asleep husband, "What would you do if I got pregnant somehow?" We'd have a baby," he mumbled before rolling over. I lay there with my heart pounding. What was happening to me? I needed to know for sure. The next morning I went out and bought the most accurate pregnancy test I could find. My hands shook reading the instructions, but I forced myself to take it. I set the test stick on the counter when I was done, too nervous to look right away. When I came back a few minutes later, tears sprang to my eyes. Pregnant. This wasn't just being bloated or putting on weight. Somehow I was over 8 weeks pregnant. I thought about the test I'd found. It must have been mine. But how had I not known? My mind reeled as I tried to explain this impossibility. I decided I couldn't tell my husband until I understood what was going on. I made an urgent appointment with my doctor. She examined me and confirmed that I appeared pregnant. When I tearfully insisted this was a mistake, she gave me an ultrasound. As I lay there, she pointed at the screen. "There it is, you're about 3 months along." I gasped as I saw the tiny shape of a fetus. This was really happening. When the doctor left me to get dressed, I broke down sobbing. I had no memory of conceiving a child, but clearly a baby was growing inside me. Had I completely lost my mind? Was I sleepwalking through an entire pregnancy? What else had happened that I'd forgotten? My thoughts spiraled as I imagined some trauma or psychosis that fractured my memories. Or worse, what if someone did this to me while I was unconscious? What if I'd been assaulted but my mind blocked it out? When I got home, I had to tell my husband everything. At first he looked at me like I was insane, but as I recounted the bizarre chain of events and showed him the ultrasound, his face slowly drained of color. "What are you saying?" he whispered. "You're carrying a child that's not mine?" I saw the disbelief and betrayal in his eyes, but I had no explanations, only fears about my own lost time and troubling gaps in recollection. Suddenly he grabbed his keys and stormed out, saying he needed space alone to think. In the agonizing days that followed, I racked my brain trying to piece together some understanding of how I could be pregnant without realizing it. My husband avoided me as he wrestled with his own impossible doubts. I could endure the uncertainty no longer. I needed to know the truth of what had been done to me. While my husband was out, I snuck into his home office and turned on his computer. Hands trembling, I searched until I pulled up his browsing history. What I saw there made my blood turn to ice. Dozens of searches and site visits related to inducing memory loss, accessing the subconscious, and hypnotic suggestion techniques. Notes in his own handwriting describing sinister methods to control and manipulate. My heart dropped as I realized this went beyond mere suspicion of an affair. The clicking of the front door opening jarred me from my horrified trance. As I hurried to close the incriminating pages, I heard footsteps approaching down the hall, then stop abruptly. When I turned around slowly, my husband was standing there, flowers in hand. His eyes bore into me with an intensity I'd never seen before. "I wanted to surprise you," he said quietly, glancing at the computer screen, "to celebrate our little miracle." He moved towards me, no longer the man I thought I knew. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. His smile spread wider as he placed a hand on my swollen belly. "Don't worry, darling," he crooned. "I'll take good care of you and our baby." The last thing I saw was his hand reaching for me, clasping a damp rag that smelled sickly sweet. As everything faded away, his face blurred until only the cold darkness remained. When I awoke, only traces lingered in my mind. Half-formed memories and unsettled feelings quickly dissolving like sand through my fingers. I glanced around, dazed and uncertain. I was home in bed, my husband slumbering peacefully beside me. Had I been dreaming? As I stared up at the ceiling, waiting for sleep to reclaim me, I felt my hand drift to my stomach, which had just begun to gently swell. It was Grandma Rose's 85th birthday, and our whole family gathered at her little house to celebrate. I always loved visiting Grandma because her house smelled like fresh chocolate chip cookies, and she let me eat as many as I wanted. She said the key to living to a ripe old age was enjoying the little things, like tasty snacks. For her birthday, I got Grandma Rose a comfy new shawl because she was always cold. Our cousin Sarah gave her a book of crossword puzzles since Grandma loved challenging her sharp mind. My dad hauled in the biggest gift, a brand new TV to replace Grandma's ancient little one from the 90s. After we all sang happy birthday and ate cake, it was time to open presents. Grandma carefully unwrapped each gift, oohing and ahhing over everyone. When she got to my shawl, she wrapped it around her shoulders and said it was perfect. I felt that familiar glow of joy that came from making Grandma Rose happy. But when she unwrapped the TV, her face fell for just a moment before she pasted on a smile. "What a thoughtful gift," she said politely. I could tell Dad was disappointed by her reaction. We all knew how much Grandma hated change and loved her vintage TV. After that, Grandma took her time opening the rest of her presents, like she was avoiding something. Finally, there was only one gift left, a small, flat box wrapped in silver paper. "This one is from me," Grandma said, holding the present in her lap. "I've been saving it for a special occasion." She handed the box to me. "Go on, open it." I tore off the paper. Inside was a dark wooden box engraved with delicate flowers. It looked very old. I lifted the hinged lid and plinking music began to play. A sweet lullaby. Inside the box was a little figurine of a girl in a fluffy dress, spinning slowly atop a platform. "It's a music box," Grandma Rose said softly. "It belonged to your mother when she was just a little girl. See, there's even a tiny picture of her inside the lid." I stared at the faded photo of a laughing toddler who looked just like my mom. I realized the lullaby seemed distantly familiar, like a half-forgotten song from my childhood. "Thank you, Grandma," I said. "I'll treasure it." She patted my hand. "You're so much like her, you know," Grandma said. She adored that little music box. She used to fall asleep listening to its song every night. I hope it will be a way for you to feel closer to her. My throat tightened with emotion. Mom died when I was 5 years old. I didn't remember much about her, but it meant the world to me to have something that connected us. After the party, I took the music box home and placed it on my nightstand. The lullaby's soothing melody helped me fall asleep that night. In my dreams, I could almost hear my mother humming along. The next evening, I was up late studying when I decided to wind the music box. As the tinkling song filled my room, I thought I heard the faintest hint of it outside my window. I paused the box. The sound continued, muffled and distant in the night. Strange, I thought. The song faded before I could make sense of it. I told myself it was just my imagination. But over the next few weeks, something even weirder started happening. At random times, late at night, I'd hear that familiar lullaby outside my bedroom window. No matter how quickly I peeked through the blinds, I never saw anyone. The distant singing always stopped abruptly if I made any noise. I tried to convince myself it was just a neighbor's wind chimes or ringtone, but deep down, I knew it was the exact melody from the music box, sung in a hushed, haunting voice. One drizzly night, the singing came again, more clearly than ever. I crept on tiptoes to the window to listen. Rain pattered against the glass as the eerie lullaby continued. Goosebumps prickled my skin and my heart pounded. I dared to peer out into the gloom. Lightning flashed. For an instant, I thought I saw a figure standing beneath my window, face upturned. Then it was gone. I leaped back, terrified but too intrigued to let it go. Who was out there? Why did they keep singing that song? After the next few incidents, I tried to record the voice. But each time I fumbled with my phone, the singing stopped before I could catch it. I even considered setting up a camera, but worried about what I might capture. What if this wasn't just some prank by neighborhood kids? That question was answered soon enough. One stormy night, I lay awake listening to the howling wind and driving rain. Suddenly, someone began singing the familiar lullaby right outside my bedroom window. Before I could lose my nerve, I rushed to flick on the light and threw open the curtains. My breath caught in my throat. There, inches from the glass, was my mother's pale face glowing in the darkness. Her eyes were closed as if in peaceful sleep, her hair billowing wildly in the storm. I stood there paralyzed until the apparition slowly opened her eyes. Her gaze met mine, sad and longing. My screams died in my throat. I wanted to look away but couldn't. Lightning flashed, revealing her ghostly form. That toddler's dress I recognized from the music box photo. Hands pressed pleadingly to the glass. Thunder boomed, and when I could see again, she was gone, vanished into the wind and rain. The next day I told myself it was some bizarre lucid dream brought on by stress, and the creepy lullaby stuck in my head. But a part of me knew what I'd seen, and each night as the singing returned, she was there waiting under my window, my mother as a child, gazing up with that anguished, lovesick expression. I became increasingly terrified and overwhelmed. Grandma Rose could tell something was wrong when I called her sobbing, but I couldn't bring myself to say what I'd seen. She just assumed I was struggling to cope as the anniversary of Mom's death approached. The nightmares grew worse than ever. But when I stopped winding the music box, the ghostly singing continued. I started to worry I was losing my mind. Finally, in desperation, I decided to get rid of the music box once and for all. As I hurried downstairs with it tucked under my arm, I bumped into my dad in the hall. The lid flew open and the lullaby chimed. Dad's eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" he asked sharply. Before I could reply, he snatched the box from my hands and threw it to the floor. I gasped as it shattered, the little spinning figurine splintering apart. "I'm sorry, honey," Dad said, dragging me into a hug as I sobbed. "It's better this way. That box, it was your mom's, but it brought us nothing but heartache. The song she played for you kids every night. It was the last thing I heard before she took her own life." His words dissolved into tears. I finally understood why the lullaby haunted me, and why my mother's ghost lingered too. The music box hadn't been a gift after all. It was Grandma's curse she meant me to inherit. One last, terrible secret to reveal about how we'd really lost my mom. But even with the box destroyed, I can still hear her sometimes, singing that same sad song. And though I've begged her to leave me be, she won't stop until I understand what drove her to the edge. Her ghost will never rest until someone listens. It started a week ago. I was lying in bed, just drifting off to sleep when I heard it. Faint scratching sounds coming from directly under me. I figured it was just my cat messing around under the bed, so I leaned over and shined my phone flashlight at the noise. Nothing there but dust bunnies. Weird, I thought. Must have imagined it. But when I put my head back down, the scratching started up again. I was too sleepy to deal with it right then, but over the next few nights it kept happening. Light scritch noises right under my mattress in the middle of the night. Sometimes it would stop if I made loud noises or banged on the wall. Other times it would keep going no matter what I did. Obviously, this was freaking me out. I started dreading going to bed. I'd toss and turn listening for the sounds. When my parents asked why I was so tired all the time, I just said I'd been staying up late gaming. No way was I telling them something was scratching under my bed every night. They'd never believe me. But by the 5th night, I had to figure out what was making the noise. When it started up that night, I shoved aside all my junk crammed under the bed until I uncovered the bare floor. I grabbed my phone and shined the light on the hardwood boards. Right away, I saw faint but unmistakable scratches in the wood. They looked almost like letters. Heart pounding, I pieced together what was clawed into the floor. Over and over in jagged writing were the words, "Leave now." I jumped back with a yelp, nearly dropping my phone. This had to be some kind of twisted prank. But who would sneak into my room just to scratch creepy messages under my bed? Why hadn't I ever noticed before? Part of me wanted to go wake up my parents, but I knew they'd assume I did it myself for attention or something. No way would they believe me if I said a ghost was leaving me threats. I shoved the mess back under my bed and got back in cautiously. The scratching had stopped for the night. As I lay there wide awake, I convinced myself it was just some dumb neighborhood kids trying to scare me. Next time I'd catch them red-handed. But the following night, it happened again. I chased the sounds in circles, trying to pinpoint where they were coming from. It wasn't until I checked under the bed that I found a new chilling message scratched into the floorboards. Nowhere to hide. Over the next few weeks, the messages got more and more disturbing. Every night, something new would be clawed into the hardwood. "Can't run. I see you. Tick-tock." By now, I was a nervous wreck. I set up my phone camera to record under the bed, but it never caught anything. Whoever was leaving the messages only came when I was in bed. I even sprinkled flour on the floor to try and catch footprints or claw marks, but never found any trace of an intruder. It was like the words were appearing by themselves. My breaking point came one night when I woke up to a loud, frantic scratching. I whipped open the underside bed drawer and gasped. Right before my eyes, invisible claws were carving a new message. "Your soul is mine." I screamed so loud my parents came running. Dad grabbed his baseball bat ready to fight. When I showed them the carved words, they went pale. But they insisted we talk about it in the morning. Said I needed sleep. Obviously, they didn't get how terrifying this was. The next day, Mom wanted me to see a therapist, thinking I did this myself to externalize inner feelings. Yeah, right. When I refused to admit I made it up, Mom and Dad set up cameras facing the bed. They promised we'd get to the bottom of this soon. That night I barely slept, listening in dread for the scratches to start up. Around 2 a.m., the now familiar scritch of claws began under my mattress. Fighting panic, I glanced at the bedside camera. The red light was still on. It was recording. I'd have proof. The next morning I leaped out of bed and grabbed Dad's laptop to view the footage. But when we pulled up the recording, all we saw was an empty room. The eerie messages were nowhere to be seen. It had to be a glitch. I showed them the new words carved under the bed, "All eyes on you." Still, they refused to believe this was real. Things got worse and worse. The messages turned into grotesque threats. "I'll swallow your eyes, feed me your flesh." I became convinced something evil was haunting me. My window and closet terrified me at night. Going to sleep felt like being buried alive. Then one morning, I woke up bleeding. There were deep scratches on my arms and chest that hadn't been there the night before. When Mom saw them, she broke down crying, begging me to tell the truth. But I had no idea where the marks came from. That night I stayed up gripping my baseball bat, determined to stay awake. But exhaustion overcame me. The next thing I knew, it was morning. I was covered in new scratches, oozing blood. Worst of all, raw claw marks ran down my face and neck. I screamed for Mom and Dad, no longer caring if they thought I was crazy. "We had to move," I sobbed. I couldn't take another night. At their wits' end, they agreed to sleep in sleeping bags on my bedroom floor. If this was real, surely they would witness it too. Late that night, we lay side by side, staring blindly into the darkness. After hours of silence, I finally drifted off. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by the sound of my mom shrieking. Dad bolted upright, yelling and fumbling for the light. When he flipped it on, I choked in horror. My mom sat there clutching a bloody gash on her cheek, fresh red marks running down her trembling arms. Wild-eyed, she pointed at the bed. My dad was writing in dripping crimson. "She's mine now." The next day, we burned everything in my bedroom and moved far away. We never spoke of what happened that night, but it haunts me every time I lie down to sleep. Were there ever any ghostly messages under my bed? Or had the darkness been inside my father all along, just waiting to claw its way out? I'll never know for sure. But I still see Mom's scared eyes in my dreams, and the eerie scritch-scritch of invisible claws never leaves my head.